Hello and welcome. You're watching News9 Live with me, Neha Khanna, and joining me today is a very special guest. We have India's G20 Sherpa and former Niti Aayog CEO Amitabh Kant with us. Mr. Kant, welcome to News9 Live.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you so much for making the time at a time when you must be swamped with work. Let me begin by asking you this. Now, everyone's talking about the G20 Summit. It's happening here in India next month. Top global leaders are going to be in New Delhi. It is perhaps one of the biggest events on the diplomatic global calendar. You've already organized, correct me if I'm wrong, some 220 events in 60 cities across India. And now we have the big one coming up. As somebody who is spearheading most of the preparatory work for this mega event, what would you say goes into preparing for such a big occasion?
So there are several components to it, and first and foremost is that you must be able to get the New Delhi Declaration to perfection. And this means that you leaders are getting together to actually discuss, finalize the New Delhi Leaders Declaration. I'm the G20 Sherpa. That means my job is to enable my leader. I'm an assistant and a support. I have to provide assistance and support to my leader, who's the Prime Minister, to reach on top of the Mount Everest. And that is really the key to this New Delhi Summit. And this means that you have to negotiate that across several areas on all your priorities. The theme is One Earth, One Family, One Future, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, but we are discussing a range of priorities which have to be all 20 countries, including 9 invitee countries, 29 countries have to agree to. That is the work which has been going on for a year. And finally, the Sherpas negotiate on behalf of the leaders, and we'll finally take it forward. So that negotiation is one critical component of it. The second is about how you execute the G20 Leaders Summit, on which a whole range of officers, the logistic division, everyone works towards that. And the third bit is that the summit itself on its at Bharat Mandapam, which is the new Pragati Maidan, its execution over 2 days will be critical. Managing the leaders who come in at the hotels, from their arrival to the hotels on which the protocol of the Ministry of External Affairs looks after. That's a whole comprehensive job. So that is really the task of organizing it to perfection. Our task is really that we put in our best on the content side, on the execution of the event, and on taking care of all the guests who come to India.
It is an enormous logistical operation. There is no doubt about that. But if we were to look at the larger picture, what, according to you, would be the impact of India hosting the G20 Summit this year? There is no doubt that India's global stature has risen significantly in recent years. But now being the host of the G20 Summit, what do you think it means for India's position on the global stage?
So it's for the first time, as president of G20, India has played a very key and critical role in bringing around the key priorities. One is that important to understand that the world is getting into a recession. Germany has just gone into a recession. So 1/3 of the world is in recession. The post-COVID era has seen a vast segment of population go below the poverty line. And it's very important that we build up strong, sustainable, inclusive growth. That's number one. The second key is that SDG goals, which are to be implemented by 2030, the Sustainable Development Goals, only 12% of them are on target. Most of them are behind schedule. So the COVID has had an adverse impact. We need to accelerate the pace of implementation of these goals. Third is that climate action and climate finance will be a very key feature of what we do, and therefore that has to be center stage. And how do we build up a green movement around this? And because you need more resources to flow in for both SDG and climate finance, multilateral financial institutions and their reforms will be a very critical issue, because these institutions have to be reformed for the world of tomorrow, to look after issues of both climate and SDGs. And then there is the challenge of technological transformation, of digital public infrastructure, which India has really spearheaded, and ensuring that all countries accept it and we drive that movement forward. And lastly, I would say, is that India has brought the priority of women empowerment and gender equality center stage. As the Prime Minister says, it's women-led development, and therefore that is a key philosophy which we'll drive. But all this will fit in within the broad theme of one earth, one family, one future. So negotiating with all the 29 countries, building consensus across 29 countries is the key challenge.
And the process, as you said, has gone on for a year now. Let me ask you a couple of questions together. As the G20 host, what do you think the international community expects from India? And the G20 is also a great platform for promoting trade and cultural ties. How much of an opportunity do you think it has been for India to showcase its soft power to the world?
So India did its G20 presidency in a very different manner than, most countries do it in one city or two cities. We've used this opportunity to take G20 to the people of India. The Prime Minister's vision was that it should be showcased in all the states of India. So we took it to all the states, we took it to 60 cities of India. We gave an opportunity through the states to show their culture. We gave them an opportunity to expose their art forms. We gave an opportunity to the states to promote their one district, one product. We gave an opportunity to promote millets. We've done School Connect, University Connect, College Connect, so that model G20s were held across schools and colleges. So we've done our best to make it a people's presidency rather than an elitist club. That's how India's G20 has been very, very different from the rest of the world.
People-centric, and
Absolutely.
to think that you actually had one of your events in Kashmir.
Yes. Not only Kashmir, we've done it in all the states of India. And Kashmir was very well received, because the people of Kashmir welcomed it, they participated in it. It has given a big impetus to travel and tourism in Kashmir as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me ask you this now. I want to focus on some specific issues. You've been involved in this entire process. As I said, you're spearheading it for the last 1 year. And you've talked about how this involves protracted negotiations with multiple countries. How much of a challenge has it been to deal with China? Are we expecting the Chinese president to visit New Delhi next month? And could there be bilateral talks between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the G20 summit?
So I think first and foremost it's important to understand that China is a multilateral player. It participates very actively, very positively in all G20 negotiations. In every single working group it has participated. It has issues bilaterally, but multilaterally it's a player. And we've negotiated with them. We've negotiated with them like we've negotiated with any other country. And it's been a lot of give and take with them, and we've managed to convince them on a number of priorities, and they've played a very constructive and positive role, let me tell you that, in G20. And we are confident that in the coming days we'll be able to get them around on many other issues.
There was recently a controversy, sorry to interrupt you, that they objected to India using the term Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam because it's a Sanskrit term, not one of the official UN languages.
Yeah, but they've agreed to that, subsequent discussions, and they're fine with it now. And so we managed to convince them on a number of, they have a stand on certain issues, but we managed to convince them. And that's a part of negotiations. And our job is to bring every single country around. That's a tough job, but it's a job which needs to be done. And that's why negotiations take a very long time. You start at 2, end at 2 in the night. It's a very, very tough process.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
You're in a rather unenviable position right now. This must mean a lot of sleepless nights for
and
you.
we are expecting every single country to participate in this.
So if I could ask you this question again, sorry, I know I'm putting you on the spot here. Can we expect President Jinping here in
I
Delhi?
don't want to comment on individual leaders, but we are expecting everyone to be, we are in the process of that, so it will be inappropriate for me to comment on any individual leaders, but let me say that we are expecting every leader to participate.
Because there is a lot of interest in China, for obvious reasons, many are wondering, could we see the two leaders holding bilateral talks on the sidelines of this summit?
So that I'm concerned with the G20 part of it. The G20, I don't get into the bilateral relations, but the G20 part of it, we are expecting every single country to participate in this. And we look forward to, they've participated through the year, every single meeting. They've participated in the Sherpa track meeting, and they will all participate, and we expect everybody to participate in the G20 side.
Yes. I mean, of course, all the top world leaders are going to be here, but I think there is special interest in China and Russia here in India. So let's now address the elephant in the room, Russia. For a year and a half now, it is no secret that the Russia-Ukraine war has dominated the global discourse. It's hijacked all major summits. We saw what happened in Bali last year. India's stance on Russia has been quite different from that of the West. India has asserted its strategic autonomy. But at the same time, when Prime Minister Modi said to President Putin that this is not an era of war, those words resonated globally. Now the question that many are asking is New Delhi hoping to use the G20 summit as a negotiating table to initiate some sort of dialogue that could possibly pave the way for an end to the war? Because many have said that we are looking to India for that kind of leadership in these times.
So the issue of, when you discuss G20, it's an economic forum, but there is a fallout on geopolitics.
Geopolitics is now inevitably intertwined with it.
So this came up for discussion in the last G20 at Bali, because the contention of many G7 countries was that the war is impacting food, fuel and fertilizer. But the G20 then fell back on the United Nations resolution and said that this is the UN resolution, and Para 3 dealt with that of the Bali resolution and quoted the resolution and the voting pattern, etc., as far as Para 3 is concerned. But it was done in Bali, which did not hold subsequently. Para 4 has been broadly accepted by Russia, and we are quite hopeful that while Ukraine is not an important issue for us, let me tell you, for us the issues are developmental issues, because we bring the concerns of the developing countries, we bring the concerns of Africa, we bring the concerns of emerging markets, we bring the concerns of, and the Prime Minister has already written to everyone to make AU a permanent member, and we are very hopeful of achieving success on that. Those are our concerns. We are, for us, the Ukraine issue is not a significant issue, but because it has a bearing on some other parts of the world, we would discuss that, and we are quite hopeful of arriving at a solution to that issue as far as the many other developmental issues are concerned.
So do you believe this could be an opportunity for India to play peace broker? No, even though Ukraine will not be in attendance, but...
So we don't want to get into divert the attention away from G20. G20 is the issue. The G20 is a developmental forum. It's an economic forum. It's a growth forum. And I think we should stick to G20. That is, as the G20 Sherpa, my view is that that is really the movement right now. And G20 by itself is a major issue to be able to see through, and our focus should remain steadfast on achieving success as far as G20 is concerned.
You know, I don't disagree with you at all as far as this agenda is concerned. However, the US, China and Russia will have to agree with you as well. Yeah. But, okay, so let me ask you a different question. Can we expect President Putin to attend it in person?
So, I'm not going to comment on individual leaders. All I would say is that all G20 partners have been invited, and we expect all of them to participate.
I'm sorry to push this, but one more time I'll try. Have you got a confirmation from either China or Russia about the presence of their top leaders?
All that I would say is that all leaders of G20 normally participate. All of them have been invited. Whether confirmation or not confirmation, it will not be appropriate for me to comment at this stage on a television channel.
Because President Putin is going to attend the BRICS summit virtually, and of course India held the SCO summit virtually. Therefore, many are wondering, even though we have very friendly ties with Russia.
No, we have very friendly ties with Russia.
Yeah.
We have friendly ties with all G7 countries. We have friendly ties with everyone. But we've invited all G20 leaders, and we are expecting all of them to participate very vigorously.
So despite the geopolitical scenario that we find around ourselves, you do believe President Putin will attend in person?
So I'm not going to comment individually on any individual leader. That's not an appropriate thing to do at this stage. We are expecting all leaders to participate and participate in the New Delhi Leaders Summit from all over the world.
Now I want to talk about what happened in Bali, because the context is important. We saw that there was no joint statement at the end of the day. There was a communique released, but there was no consensus on a joint statement.
Bali?
Yes, because of the sharp differences on the Russia-Ukraine war. There was no consensus among leaders, which is why there could not be a joint statement at the end of it. It had a communique, but not a joint statement, because there was no consensus among the leaders because of the Russia-Ukraine war. So my question simply is, number one, do you believe that there is going to be a joint statement at the end of the G20 Delhi summit? You're calling it a New Delhi declaration. Do you believe that all parties are likely to be signatories to it? And are you somewhere concerned that the Russia-Ukraine war could overshadow this summit or perhaps even hijack it, because it's happened in the past?
No. So the communique, let me first clarify that the communique is the statement. The New Delhi leaders' communique is the statement. That has been negotiated. Even in Bali, the communique is the statement. There's no separate statement issued.
But normally there is a joint statement, and there wasn't one in Bali.
No, that's not correct. The Bali had a discussion on para 3 and 4. The communique is the statement issued by the leaders. There's no separate statement after that. You can say that there was no family photograph or something like that. That's all right. Okay. But there's no separate statement is issued. The communique is issued. The communique is being drafted. It will be discussed by the Sherpas. It will be finalized, and we'll take it forward. We are very hopeful of having a communique in Delhi. And without differences, we look forward to having a consensus of all countries on the communique. That's the only communique which will get issued. There's no separate statement.
So let me ask you this.
And in no other place is a separate statement issued. It's only the communique.
So let me...
That's the New Delhi leaders' communique.
Okay, but clearly consensus was missing in Bali, and therefore my question to you is, are you hopeful that you can evolve a consensus, and how does New Delhi plan to address the sharp divergence of views that exist within the G20 forum, especially with regard to China and Russia?
So let me first put it that in Bali we could arrive at a consensus through para 3 and 4. Para 3 and 4 on geopolitics had recorded difference of opinion between different countries. Yeah.
That's good.
So the challenge here also is that in para, what was there, the para 3, wherever we put it, we should be able to get a perspective. This has happened before in G20, in Osaka, in Hamburg, where Trump was against climate change totally. The American perspective was recorded. He had a different view from 19 countries. It was recorded. Yeah. So if there is a different perspective, there should be recorded as a consensus. There should not be a footnote. It should be recorded. That should be a part of the statement, a part of the communique. That is what we will try and bring consensus around everybody and try and find a way out.
And is there any concern that this overarching global issue could in some ways overshadow the larger G20 agenda?
No, I have no doubt that we'll remain steadfast in our attempt to focus on the developmental issues, the issues of growth, the issues of financial inclusion, the issues of emerging markets. Ukraine is not an important issue for us.
I know you said that as the Sherpa, you're of course looking at organizing a great event here in India. You're not really looking at bilaterals, but I'll just take my chances and ask you this question. Can we expect some bilateral talks to take place on the sidelines of this summit?
No. When a leaders' summit takes place, there are also bilaterals held. There will be bilaterals. That's
Can you share some details?
No. I would not like to share those details because that's something which has not yet been finalized. Okay. There will be requests from many countries, and those bilaterals will be discussed, and the Prime Minister will decide on his bilaterals.
Okay. So let me ask you this. Do you believe that India can evolve a consensus and bring all the G20 nations together on the global challenges that we currently face, addressing issues like climate change, food security, energy security crisis, supply chain disruptions? You talked about the need for the world to move towards a more inclusive and sustainable growth and development model. How much of a role do you think India is likely to play through the G20 summit?
No, India is playing a very critical role. India will evolve a consensus on all these issues, on all developmental issues, including growth, including financial inclusion, including climate, including many of these areas. We'll evolve a consensus. That's our job as leaders of G20 to evolve, and we'll fully succeed in that. There's no doubt about it.
The Prime Minister has said time and again, India is going to be the voice of the Global South through its G20 presidency. Now that the summit is round the corner and we took over the baton last November, if I'm not mistaken, would you say that New Delhi has lived up to that promise?
Oh, New Delhi has more than lived up to it. New Delhi has more than lived up to it because this kind of a G20 presidency has never been held before.
Why?
Nowhere. Because first of all,
so
G20 has remained an elitist body restricted to one city or two cities. Nowhere before the G20 has been taken out to the states, to the people, made into a mass movement like India has done. Nowhere has the G20 addressed the concerns of the developing countries. India has truly emerged as the voice of the Global South. Nowhere has the G20 become more powerful than even the Security Council of the United Nations, as it has done during India's presidency. Nowhere in the world has the G20 focused on all the key issues of the world, confronting the world today, as India has done here. And nowhere has the narrative of India come out so forcefully as the G20 of India. I don't think G20, no other country has held G20 in a professional manner as India has done.
And so if you believe that India is truly the voice of the Global South and we speak on behalf of the developing world, do you believe that that is going to reflect in the outcome of this summit?
Absolutely. Our leaders' declaration will reflect a complete voice of those who are, if you look at the growth, 80% of the growth is going to come from developing countries, IMF figures. Next 2 decades, all growth will come from developing countries. But this declaration will be the voice of the developing nations, as the Prime Minister has said. The Prime Minister started out with the voice of the Global South, and we will reflect the voice of the Global South in America.
You sound very positive and optimistic on that front. The Prime Minister has taken another very important initiative. He has said the African Union should find a voice in the G20 bloc. He's written to all his G20 counterparts asking them to give full membership to the African Union. I know it's been reported that the response has been overwhelmingly positive, but the question I want to ask is it something that is now going to come to fruition during this particular summit?
Yes, it will.
The formalization of this membership?
It is being discussed. I won't be able to tell you the final outcome, but it will definitely come during this G20 presidency.
It'll be
during India's presidency.
It'll be taken up, but do you see it becoming a reality during this very summit?
Absolutely.
So most G20 nations are in agreement on this?
Broadly.
They are?
Yes. We are debating and discussing, but broadly, yes. Okay. They have responded very positively to the Prime Minister's letter.
Okay. And so you're hopeful that this will be accomplished?
We are very hopeful.
Okay. I don't want to bring in domestic politics into this, but since this is related to G20, I might as well put this question to you. How would you react to the Congress party's accusation that the Modi government is using the G20 Summit to launch its election campaign for 2024 and to divert attention from the challenges that the country faces today?
No, I don't want to get into politics. All that I would like to say that hosting the G20 is a great honor for India. India has done a great job of hosting it very professionally. India has done a great job of projecting the issues of the global south. India has done a phenomenal job of laying down an agenda for the world, and that reflects on Prime Minister's ability to really bring all countries together to highlight all the concerns of the world. So this is the first time India has laid down the agenda. So far we are responding to the agenda. This is the time when we have actually spelled out a global agenda and played a key role in that.
Absolutely, and very diplomatically answered. Finally, let me ask you this. As somebody who's playing such a significant role in ensuring the success of this mega global event, the spotlight will be on India. What would you want India's G20 legacy to be? How would you want the world to perceive it?
So I think that India's G20 legacy should be in terms of a vast number of India's narratives, whether it's life, whether it's digital public infrastructure, whether it's traditional medicines, many of these things. But its legacy will also be around having emerged as a clear voice of the global south and having made the G20 more powerful than even the Security Council of the United Nations during its presidency.
That's very interesting. So in terms of India's global stature, we've talked about India's contribution to the world, but in terms of India's global stature, what do you think it really means for us to actually be the G20 hosts?
So, we are the 5th largest economy in the world. We will be, in the next few years, the 3rd largest economy in the world. We should continue to grow. We should continue to expand rapidly as far as economic power is concerned, because that gives you the political heft. Hosting events like G20 enhance your diplomatic heft in a very big way, your ability to negotiate, your ability to build a completely new agenda. And G20 acts as a very big driver and gives impetus to your, you've been able to take foreign policy and diplomacy to every door of India, every student of India. There can't be a better opportunity.
I agree. And the reason I ask that is because, a permanent seat in the UN Security Council continues to elude us. But there is no doubt that India has arrived on the global stage. And I think our G20 presidency is testament to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other important thing is that you'll have 4 emerging markets, Indonesia, India, Brazil, South Africa, all hosting G20 presidency. So within the G20, the developing nations are playing a very key role. And that demonstrates that economic strength is actually slowly passing on to the developing countries. They will have to play a very critical role in G20. And to my mind, while the United Nations Security Council is frozen, G20 has become a very active and a very powerful movement during India's presidency to take forward many global issues.
Absolutely. And at the start of this interview, you said, your effort is to take India and Prime Minister Modi to the summit of the Mount Everest. As the G20 Sherpa, what would be personally most satisfying for you once this event is over?
Well, the fact that we've been able to conduct it in the best possible manner, professionally, and that we've been able to execute it efficiently, and the fact that we've been able to achieve a New Delhi leaders' declaration. I think that will give me immense satisfaction.
And you don't anticipate any trouble there?
There will be challenges. Let me tell you, there are challenges, huge challenges. That's in the nature of global polity. But we should be able to handle these challenges.
Absolutely. Final question and a personal one. I can't resist. Is it really true that you're quitting public life after this?
No, I never said I'm quitting public life, but all that I said is that I would, as a professor, as a person who's interested in reading, writing, I would prefer to read and write. And
so what next for Amitabh Kant, the man who's seen it all and done it all?
No. So I allow life to play out and let's see what shape it takes. But I've done a lot in my official career. I've had a long innings, and I think we should allow a lot of young people to take leadership forward, and I'm a great believer in working with young people, so I'll move on. I'll do many other things.
Many other things like?
Like reading, writing. I've just written a book on,
yes.
You know, it's a book on Made in India, and it brings out 75 years of business and enterprise. I have a few more ideas on writing, and I will continue to read. I'll continue to write.
And you're an avid golfer?
I'm a golfer. I'll play golf and I'll improve my handicap. But I will do many more things. I mean, there are many more creative things to be done.
You have so much more to offer, I have no doubt. But many must also wonder, why shouldn't a man like Amitabh Kant be in active politics? He has so much to offer.
I don't think I'm cut out for politics. I'll do anything but politics, but I'm not cut out for it. But I'll do many more developmental things. I believe in working on the ground. I've worked with traditional fishermen in Kerala. I've worked with aspirational districts. I've done the Startup India movement, many other things. So passion for me is doing transformation on ground.
Clearly, it's visible, it's something we've all been witness to. And on that note, more power to you, Mr. Kant. And here's wishing you the very best with the G20 Summit.
Thanks a lot.
Really hope it's a grand success.